Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Football House on House Enterprise. I'm Sam Basil, joined alongside our usual crew of Will Tondo, Jake Zimmer, Cole Hughes, and guys, we've made it. We are now in Conference Championship Week. The regular season of the 2024 college football campaign has concluded. 9 games on the docket this weekend, one more game next weekend. That's Army-Navy. And then we are in full bowl swing. I'm feeling great. I think this is going to be an excellent conference championship weekend. There's a lot of teams that are still maybe making a final push for the playoffs. There's been a little bit of controversy in the most recent committee rankings. We're going to get into all that. But first, I just want to get your thoughts, just kind of go around the horn here and just ask, just your thoughts on the college football season so far. Tondo, exceeded expectations, didn't meet them, or they were exactly where you thought they were going to be?
I would say exactly where they thought, to that exceed level. I mean, they've been phenomenal. I think they've been definitely the most entertaining to watch, to cover, to follow along. I think on a media standpoint, as well as just a viewership standpoint, like every week does matter, and there has been plenty of upsets. I mean, last week and the week, like the past 2 weeks, just in terms of top 25, it's like I have to sit there and really think about it. And I kind of think that the entire year, to be honest, like there's definitely been week after week where it's like in years past, you can mail in a top 25 because like nothing changed. I feel like every week something has happened. And I would say arguably this week is probably the most important week of the college football season, because there's going to be there could be everything is status quo and we see this field to 12 on how we anticipate, or we might see some losses that help Alabama, Clemson, some other folks, shuffle things around. So I'm excited. I think it was a great rivalry week last week, and I'm excited for conference championships.
Yeah, Cole, like Tondo said, I mean, there have been way more games. I mean, at the Football House, we love watching everything, right? But in terms of determining the playoff picture, there have been so many more games that have had a direct impact throughout the entire season. And how much do you think the new 12-team format? I mean, obviously it impacted it, but do you like this broader impact, the fact that you have to pay attention to so many more games and so many more conferences, as opposed to let's just see what the best 2 SEC teams and the best 2 Big Ten teams are up to as we get to the 14 playoff? How much have you liked having just such a broader range of games that really, really matter?
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. I think, like you said, I think the big difference between this year and years past is the amount of teams that normally wouldn't even be in this discussion for a playoff spot now have the opportunity to, at least get in and make a run in the playoffs. Like teams like Boise State, teams like Arizona State, teams like SMU, right? In years past, these schools, they're playing in a New Year's Six Bowl. They're, they don't have any shot at a postseason appearance. And, this year we get that, right? And I think, like you guys have said, these games have mattered. In conference games have mattered, especially the last couple of weeks. How much things have changed. I mean, you look at BYU is a team that we thought was going to be in the playoffs all year. They're not going to be in it now, right? Miami on top of the ACC for the entire year. They might not even get into the playoff now. So a lot of things have changed, right? But I think it's great, especially for these, these schools that are, sneaking in that wouldn't be in normally. So I think it's a great opportunity for them to make some noise. And look, I think we've seen this, and we're going to see it even after this week with the conference championships. Like, it doesn't matter whether it's 4 teams, 12 teams, or whatever it is. There's going to be teams that are not happy with how it shakes out. And there's probably going to be teams that, thought that they did enough to get in and ultimately don't get in, but that's just the way it is. I mean, there's only so many spots in the playoffs, and, you had more of an opportunity where, losses weren't as, much of a big hit to you this year, because if you lose one game or two games, you're still in it. But, there's a lot of these 3-loss teams, Ole Miss, South Carolina, teams like that, they had the opportunity, but they had 3 losses. So it is what it is, and we'll get more into it. But, I love the new system. I think it's working, and, I'm excited to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely. And Jake, speaking of that new system and what Cole just alluded to, with a lot of people, still unhappy. We're on our second to last rankings right now as of Tuesday night, and there's still been a lot of fervor from coaches, athletic directors, conference representatives, right? That maybe the committee still isn't getting it right, and I think that really comes down to a lack of, in my opinion, a little bit of a lack of transparency in some ways, and a little bit of a lack of consistency in the criteria for how the committee, votes on things. Obviously, you want a diverse range of opinions. You want like a diverse range of philosophies when putting together a bracket like this, because then I think, you put all of it together, and somewhere in the middle, you're going to get the right, something close to the answer. But right now, it just doesn't feel like we're getting too much of that. Do you want more of that, or do you feel like you kind of want to let the committee kind of do their thing?
No, I want more of it, right? And I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that is okay with letting the committee do their thing and calling it a day. I don't think there's an organization in sports right now that is distrusted as the College Football Playoff Committee every year, right? This is not necessarily a new concept, but I think maybe the macro trend here is conference alignment realignment, I should say, is killing a lot of these conferences. Like, we're seeing it rear its ugly head right now. Big Ten officials had to meet on Tuesday to figure out who was actually going to play for the Big Ten championship, right? Oregon was a question mark. It was, okay, do they have tiebreakers over it wasn't Oregon. I think it was Penn State that was a question mark, right? Like, it was a tiebreaker question that they actually had to go, according to reports, to a Zoom meeting on Tuesday and figure all that stuff out. I mean, that's where we're at with this, right? Like, that is, I fully endorse the Big Ten having this power conference, and other conferences, I would imagine, will try to follow suit with this. But we are going to see, for as good as this new format is, we're going to see some problems. So I do think, to answer your question, it's a bigger issue of like, yeah, the committee needs to get itself in order, but so do all these commissioners and athletic committees of these Power 5, Power 6 conferences now. It's a sport-wide, I'd argue college athletics-wide issue here that is going to keep popping up.
Yeah, I have a hot take. I've always felt the path to college championships is the biggest mess ever. Yeah. It is one of those things where it's like, for the most part, it shakes out, but then instances where you get there, it's like, how are some teams not like even eligible to get to that level despite the season they've had? It's like, you really, a team like Miami, for example, it's like, it's crazy that they're not playing for an ACC championship. But again, it's how everything shakes out.
Yeah. 2 things on that. In general, when it comes to selection committees, I mean, what we're talking about right now, the controversy that we're seeing in the college football playoff, I mean, it's existed in the playoff since its inception, but the way we're seeing it right now is very similar to what we see every March come Selection Sunday for college basketball fans, right? Like, there's always going to be teams on the bubble that people feel like they should get in. Everyone's going to bring in their own number that justifies that pick, right? And the problem with it is the reason why it's so messy, and I think it will probably be messy forever unless we see some really radical change that I think would change the college sports landscape a little bit too much for our liking. But the problem with it staying messy is just because, I mean, there's just so many teams, right? Like, especially in football, right? You're playing 13 games in a division that has 125 plus teams, right? You're never going to be able to create one single statistic or metric or record that really perfectly displays how well you fare in comparison to the rest of the competition. You're always going to have to take this metric and this poll and this standard and this opinion and all blend it together and try and figure out, based on that, the closest thing to the truth.
Another thing too, I think that we haven't really discussed is like the idea, we've talked about this in the past, the idea of bias, right? Like certain schools have, because of their brand, are getting more favoritism from the committee, right, than other schools, right? So the whole idea that right now Alabama, as a 3-loss SEC team, has more of a chance to get in than, say, a Miami, right? Is that because of their Alabama? Yeah, it is. And is that right? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, but you can't deny that some of these schools have an advantage just because of, one, their prior success, or two, just their brand.
And in certain ways, it's like when you have nothing else, when you're really grasping at straws, it's like it's almost like the last thing you can fall back on, right? I mean, it's unfortunate. I think a lot of people talk about when it comes to polling that the problem with polling is that a lot of it is based on a preseason ranking that everyone puts out that is really just based on a lot of speculation. But at the same time, like, you do have an idea of, this school has this X amount of resources. They have X level quality of coaching compared to this school that puts this much into the football program. Like, you have to use a lot of these factors that I think a lot of people don't like in order to get this answer. And it's an impossible task. So getting into it, heading into you guys are kind of locked off on the side there. Heading into Tuesday night, this was my prediction for the college football playoff field. Pretty similar to what we saw the week before. Alabama being the last at-large team in, Arizona being the last conference champ in. And then on the bubble, I had South Carolina, Clemson, Iowa State, Army, UNLV, and Tulane. UNLV, Iowa State, and Clemson really were the teams that, in my opinion, were on the bubble because they had a chance to clinch an auto bid. South Carolina, they've had a strong showing. They beat Clemson in that last week. So they had a chance to be a sneaky at-large team. And then Army and Tulane, I thought that there was a chance that they could sneak in should UNLV beat Boise State. And they determined that the Mountain West might not be, or even the Big 12, if Iowa State beat Arizona State, that one of those two conferences is not actually the 5th best conference, and then the American somehow sneaks in. But then the committee came out with their official field, and while I had, I'll take the claps from you guys, but while I had the field exactly correct, except for they had Ohio State over Tennessee, I had Tennessee over Ohio State. Their bubble was very different. At-large wise, the two teams on the outside were Miami and Ole Miss, and then Clemson, Iowa State, and UNLV are the potential auto bid Steelers. They were a lot lower on the American than I was. They had Tulane completely out of their top 25, and they had Army on the top 25. So to me, looking at that basically means that even with a potential blowout win against Tulane this weekend, I don't think Army has really any path to the playoff. The biggest thing
I think it's unfortunate because I 95% agree with your bubble. I do like Ole Miss on the outside looking in. We sent over those chains of Lane Kiffin kind of making his case with stuff, and there was some points I agreed with. But I did agree with your standpoint of an Army or a Tulane, just because we're going to get to this playoff where what is the point of being in those conferences? And it's like, what is the point of being part of Division I football if you cannot ever achieve this? Like, if Army went undefeated, would they have gotten in, or would they still have called it a weak conference?
Well, I think they would have gotten in because they would have beaten Notre Dame in that situation. But
right
now, that's their only loss.
That's their only loss. And it's like, if you're calling it against theoretically by this field, the 6th ranked team, that's a pretty damn good loss.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's going to be interesting. It's probably won't happen this year, but I do agree with your bubble teams of like, I think there should be some representation on that point. And I'd rather see a 1-loss Army than a 3-loss Alabama.
Yeah, look, I think you guys hit the nail on the head too. Like Basil, you said like every team, especially the ones that are on the bubble on the outside looking in, they're going to come up with whatever metric that says they should be in, right? And it's hard because all these teams play different schedules and they've had different losses and different wins, big time wins against ranked teams and all that. But if you look at it, I mean, hard. I think Alabama being that last team in is controversial. Just with the other teams that are there, like in my personal opinion, I would have put probably Miami or South Carolina in over Alabama. And the only reason I say South Carolina is like, yeah, they weren't expected to be in it. They're not the same caliber team probably as Alabama. But if we're talking about the 12 best teams and like at large positions, like South Carolina, the last 6 weeks of the season, they've been one of the best teams. I mean, they've had huge wins. They've been on fire. So if that is what the committee's saying, like you're basing this bracket, the at-large ones, at least on who are the best teams, then I think South Carolina should be in over Alabama because South Carolina, if you look at their losses, they were all to SEC teams that were ranked, all 3 losses, right? And Alabama and Ole Miss, they both had really bad losses. Alabama lost to Vanderbilt, Ole Miss lost to Florida, and whoever else, but Oklahoma, I believe. But it's like, if you're talking about the best teams, then you should probably have South Carolina in out of those 3 SEC teams. And then on the flip side, Miami, they have 2 losses while all these other teams have 3. And you can say that the SEC is a harder schedule than the ACC, which I would agree with, right? So I get that. But if you look at Miami's 2 losses, it's against a Georgia Tech team that almost beat Georgia. And if they had beaten Georgia, Georgia wouldn't be in the playoffs, right? It came down to the wire, came down to 8 overtimes, and Georgia squeaked it out. So Georgia Tech, I don't really consider that a bad loss for Miami. And then there are other losses against Syracuse, which is a ranked team also, right? So I don't know why they're necessarily being punished for their 2 losses and Alabama's getting in over them. I know Alabama beat Georgia. I get it. But, there definitely is like controversy, and I can see, the stances from schools like Miami or South Carolina, even Ole Miss, because Ole Miss, they beat Georgia as well.
Absolutely. If I could actually make a case for Alabama, everything that you laid out,
wow,
is great. Here's the thing. All those pathways that Ole Miss or South Carolina or even Miami had over Alabama are totally valid. Alabama's loss to Vanderbilt, bad, not good, right? I think when you get to this point in the season and you're looking at everybody's resume, and then you have this guy beat this guy, but this guy beat this guy, and it becomes sort of like a rock paper scissors thing where you're really trying to figure out your quality of wins is all over the place. I think at the end of the day, the committee has to go to raw numbers and raw data. I know a lot of people might not love stuff like the Colley Matrix and the Sagarin rankings, but I think when you get to splitting hairs like we are right now, those numbers I think have to make a little bit of a difference. So just going off of Alabama, looking at them in ESPN's Football Power Index, they're the 4th best team. They have the 10th best strength of record and the 17th best strength of schedule. In the Colley Matrix, they are ranked 11th. In the Sagarin ratings, they're ranked 5th. Now, the Colley Matrix and the Sagarin ratings are both parts of the old BCS formula. They were used as part of the BCS to determine the participants in the original 2-team national championship games. There's another page on Twitter called bcsknowhow.com who since the conclusion of the BCS have been putting out college football playoff rankings in that same style. And right now, they have Alabama 11th and South Carolina just missing the cut at 12th. I know it's not the prettiest answer. It's not. We want things to be settled on the field, but I think when it comes down to it, like, do you guys find any value in statistics like this?
I do and I don't, because it's like at the end of the day, it's got to be as simple as like win-loss. I mean, when you look at their 3 losses, Vanderbilt, bad loss. Tennessee, playoff team. Oklahoma, you score 3 points, and they're not even sniffing this conversation. 2 weeks before conference championships, bad loss. And if you look at their wins, though, I mean, after a bye, Georgia, they win by a touchdown. South Carolina, they win by 2. LSU's not the team that we all expected it to be. And then they put up 52 points against Mercer, and everyone's like, that's a wagon. That's the offense I know Alabama is. It's like, it is kind of tough to view that, where it's like, there are other teams that are performing better, whether strength of schedule or not, on a more consistent basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we want to go by wins, though, I will say Alabama and South Carolina both finished with a 5-3 record in the SEC. I understand that the names on those wins are a little bit different, but I mean, again,
I think it's the loss
there.
I think it's the loss. That's what makes a difference for me. And look, I'm not saying like I'm not pissed that Alabama's in it, right? Because
it'll be good football.
What it came down to was it was either going to be Alabama, Ole Miss, or South Carolina, right? And out of those 3 teams, you pick Alabama. Okay, I'm all right with it. Fine. But I will say, if you look at, like we just mentioned, Alabama's losses, you have the Vandy loss, which is bad, and the Oklahoma loss, which is bad. What were South Carolina's losses? They lost to Ole Miss. They lost to Alabama. So the head-to-head goes in the favor of those 2 schools. And I don't know what the third loss was for South Carolina, but I think
LSU was their third loss.
Okay. So if you look at those 3 losses, right, like 2 of them, yes, they were head-to-head with 2 other teams that are part of this discussion, Alabama and Ole Miss. So I get that, because Ole Miss and Alabama beat them head-to-head. So that has to mean something, right? But at the same time, if you look at it, South Carolina, their 3 losses, 2 of them were to top 15 teams. So are those bad losses? I don't think so.
I think it's going to – I could see a world of college football evolving where the season starts like end of July, early August. And hear me out. There's going to be buys. There's going to be stretches, right? But your SEC tournament is going to happen starting like November 1st. And it's going to like, you'll still play through and there'll still be rankings and bowl eligibility. Because if we're going to come down to like the conversation that Cole just had, where it's like head-to-head losses and stuff, there needs to be some type of meeting for these losses to actually matter.
Yeah. So you're saying we'll see conference, you're predicting conference tournaments.
If they're already playing week after week starting in October, have it scheduled out where it's like those games actually have meeting in some type of power ranking strategy or something. I don't know. I'm just brainstorming here.
It is interesting that you say that, because I feel like a lot of other people have been suggesting the opposite, actually. And it's funny because
no tournament, like no conference
championship game, like moving to the FCS style, and a lot of FBS conferences like pre-2010. Because we got to remember, like a lot of conference championship games are pretty young. Like the Big Ten's is less than like 15 years old. But
well, look, I mean, you do that, right? That helps some teams too. Because look at like a team like SMU this week, right? Or Boise. Like if Boise didn't have to play in the Mountain West, they're in. They're in, right? If they lose to UNLV, guess what? UNLV is probably going to be in over Boise, even though their only 2 losses would be an Oregon team, which was less than 5-point loss, the number 1 team in the country, and then you lose in the conference championship to UNLV and you don't get in. Right, so that's unfortunate. And then SMU, say Clemson beats them in the ACC championship. Do they get punished and not get in at all? I think that they should, even if they do lose, and then they're the last seed. But they might not. Who are we to say that they get in if they lose? Clemson could get in, and then SMU has 2 losses, just like Miami in the ACC. What's not to say that Alabama's put in over SMU?
It's just, is this not the same exact like path that people went down with the 4-team playoff, right? Like when it expanded from 2 to 4, there were people bitching about like, now obviously the resume conversation was much different. You're talking about undefeated teams versus 1-loss teams. There was outrage every year over, hey, why is a 10-1 Alabama in over my favorite 11-0 undefeated team, right? Like I feel like that's a problem you can't really solve. You can expand this to 24 teams for that matter. And like, I still don't think that really goes away right now. I think like holes are getting poked in this just because now you have the conference winners that are guaranteed and like all that stuff. I understand that piece, but like, I don't know how you ever have a silver bullet to fix all this. Like there are going to be people that are pissed off.
Absolutely.
It could be 12 teams or it could be 30, right?
Yeah.
Like I just don't know how you fix all these issues.
I agree.
I will say an easy fix that would be cool is an NIT.
Well, I
That'd be
think
cool.
I think even on top of that, an easy fix potentially too would be for like the 11th and 12th seeds or the last 2 at-large bids, however it plays out. Like they play a play-in game with the bubble team or whatever.
But
right?
I hear you, Cole. That would be so sick. But then what happens at 13-14, right? Like 13-14 say, damn, we should have been in that. Like,
Right.
why can't we play for a bubble?
It's
you know,
never
and
gonna
then
happen. It's never going
and
to.
then you expand it to 14, and it's like 15 through 18 are like, goddamn, like, and that's when it really. Who's 14 and 15 right now? Like, just to even humor my. Let's see. So it's like, okay, yeah, 14 and 15 by way of the AP poll. Like, let's say it was a 14-team playoff, and
It's Miami
13
and
and 14 had to play. That would be Miami and Ole Miss. Can you imagine the outrage that one of those schools would have? They'd be like burning things down. Lane Kiffin would throw a riot.
Simple response: do better.
Yeah, I get it, but like, but
Do
in
better.
whose eyes, right? Like, Ole Miss has that legitimate claim, right? It's do better, but like, who had the better season, really, right? I think it's Miami personally. I think AP got it right, but like, does Ole Miss have a claim to say we played a much better schedule than Miami's cupcake ass did, and they still lost, right? It's like the whole Florida State BS last year. I'll rest my case there, but like, this stuff may never end.
I agree with you. The one thing that I do find surprising is that Georgia, no one's really talking about Georgia, right? Because they're
They're
lost.
frauds. I think they're frauds.
Because they suck.
Yeah, but they have a shot. They have a shot to win the
They do.
conference championship.
Carson Beck has been terrible this year, and there's no denying that, right? But the thing that no one's even talking about, it's like it's a guaranteed. Like if they lose to Texas this week in the SEC championship, like they're going to be a 3-loss team too, and everyone is saying it doesn't matter. They're going to be in no matter what. Like so. Then it just even strengthens the argument for Ole Miss, South Carolina, and all these other teams. It's like, well, now there's another 3-loss team. So Alabama and Georgia with their 3 losses are getting in over us. It's not just Alabama. It's now Georgia too.
Now, listen, I think Georgia's fraudulent, but their losses do. Yeah, I mean, Ole Miss gets the shit under the stick of that.
But
Out of
here's the
anybody.
thing. Here's the thing. Like with the way this bracket is set up right now, even if Georgia loses to Texas and they're the 7 seed and they go to Indiana has to go down to Athens and play Georgia, like Georgia's probably going to beat Indiana. Like that's just the reality of it. So
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah,
even with these expanded conferences, the SEC is still a better football conference.
And it definitely shows. I mean, they're definitely getting favoritism, and that's just that's the way it is. I mean, they're the best conference in football. So,
one thing that you brought up, just to kind of go back to moving towards the idea of eliminating conference championship games, because again, like I think teams are going to want to protect the especially if you're a Boise State or even now like you're an SMU. They really want to protect the best team in the conference. And we're seeing that those teams are actively, under threat of losing their spot. I mean, here's a direct quote from Ward Manuel on who's the chair of the playoff committee.
Is Ward Manuel still the AD at Michigan?
Yes, he just got extended.
Damn.
Yeah,
former UConn athletic director. Never forget.
Yeah. This is a direct quote after the last rankings came out. This is via John Talty. on whether SMU could drop below Alabama with a loss Saturday. I mean, it's very short, but he said potentially yes. So if you're the ACC, SMU went undefeated in conference play. They went 8-0. That is remarkable, no matter what conference you're in. So if they lose, you have an 8-0 regular season team dropping out of the playoff. At the end of the day, it's like, all right, maybe we just they're our champ. They're not going to play another game. We're not going to risk it. And we'll see the elimination of conference championship games. I hope that doesn't happen. I think, there is a credence to the idea of like things should be settled on the field in games, but we're really fully in uncharted waters here.
I mean, again,
the chaos too, because Clemson, they're a 3-loss team too. They beat SMU, they get that guaranteed spot, right? So, yeah. I mean, it could just lead to scenarios where there's just chaos.
There's one team we have not talked about at all yet, and it's who's probably sitting pretty right now and how this playoff field just works for them and goes to your point of no conference championships, Notre Dame.
Yep.
They get a bye right. They get a bye right now.
And we've been saying all year how it might hurt them. It might
hurt them. And it's like if this is what the bracket shakes up to be, and it's like Notre Dame, Alabama. I mean, Alabama also gets a bye as well, but who knows what the field's going to look like. I mean, it's nice for them that they can just sit pretty and be like, yeah, we had a really shitty loss, first month of the season that no one's talking about anymore. We're all arguing. We just talked for half an hour about 3 losses and 2 losses, all of that stuff. Nothing beats that NIU loss for Notre Dame. That was pathetic. And they are sitting here 6th seed. And if they beat Alabama and then play SMU, that's like, again, a more favorable matchup to get to Texas in the Final Four.
Yeah.
No, you're so right. I mean, I was saying in almost every early season pod, and I think even leading up to even last year, I might have said it too, but I just felt so strongly about this was going to be the nail in the coffin that put Notre Dame in a conference. I mean, the first part about
stay out of a conference.
The first part that I was wrong about is, they wouldn't do that just because the money's so good with their TV deal, but also now we're seeing they're getting a home game. They're getting a home game in the playoff.
And if you look at their schedule this year, really their only good wins, A&M week 1, they beat A&M at College Station, and then they beat Army, who was, undefeated to that point. Other than that, they really haven't played anyone. Like, they played Virginia, Stanford, a USC team that's been awful this year.
Again, they have played conferences, but not the good players in the conference.
Right. No. Florida State, Stanford, Purdue, come
ACC
on.
matchup.
And look, you guys know I love Notre Dame, but it's like that's a cakewalk for them.
Yeah.
So if it's Notre Dame, SMU, who are you riding with?
I don't know. I hope that.
Is that a split jersey game for Cole with the Brian Bulldog hat?
Oh God,
that's tough. That's gonna be tough.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? That's not enviable.
I don't know. I mean, you look at the bottom of that bracket right now: Notre Dame, Alabama, SMU. Those are like my 3 favorite schools.
That is literally the Cole bracket.
Yeah, it's not bad.
I think start crying might be the answer.
But I will say this: I did say at the beginning of the year that Oregon was going to win it all. So, I'm staying behind that.
Yeah. Cole, that sigh that you let out was like, I've never heard more anguish and stress out of you in the history of this show.
Great anxiety. That's almost as bad as if Texas A&M got in.
Oh, jeez. I know. What would you do if Mike Elko was standing there, just taunting you?
Oh, man. Well, I think we can debate, the semantics and the methodologies for the college football playoff until the sun.
You mean we haven't solved this all? We don't have a proposal to just give to the committee and say, here you go, motherfuckers.
Charlie Baker, here you go. Figure it out.
Yeah. This is a problem for where is Governor Baker in all this? Why isn't he taking an aggressive leadership stance and saying, put Miami in the tournament?
Well, the NCAA really has no. This is not.
I know. Yeah, isn't that crazy? In and of itself,
conversation.
It's literally
that's for another day. Yeah.
I mean, it's by design. The NCAA is do whatever you want. Nuts. Because the way it works is, we've talked about it on the show before, where it's like there really is no official NCAA FBS championship. They recognize all these different ones. That's why UCF was able to claim a national championship. Like there's all these different selectors, where the NCAA is like, yep, sure, we'll throw that in the record books if you say so.
And a lot of people. That's why Yale has like 30 national championships under their belt.
Yeah, and so what a lot of people don't realize is for all the pomp and circumstance that we give the college football playoff, according to the NCAA record books, it's just as valid of a college football championship than the USA Today coaches poll, right? So, which we like the USA Today coaches poll, but it's all kind of a mess, and it's by design. It's so these schools and these conferences can really have a say, but right now it's like they're all just bickering over how it's going to play out. But we can bicker about this for hours and hours and hours, but let's get into our game picks. We've got 9 fantastic games coming up this weekend. Kicking us off on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern is the Conference USA Championship game, Western Kentucky versus Jacksonville State. Jacksonville is hosting this one. And this is a really fun one because not only are we seeing a rematch of 2 conference opponents, but we are seeing a rematch a week after we just got the first meeting between these two. Western Kentucky took this one 19-17. It was a really grinded out game. The Hilltoppers, they kind of got through it with their, just their better pass unit.
They also kicked a field goal with 7 seconds left.
Yeah, they won. They won with a field goal. So this is really up in the air. Jacksonville is getting actually the points here. They are a 5-point favorite as of tonight. So starting off with you, Tondo. Or actually, before we get into it, I would like to point out that as you can see on this graphic here, Tondo's spread is different than Cole and I's spread, and that is.
So I'm taking the 5.
Well, I wanted to leave it on there because Tondo, you submitted your picks to me earlier in the week, and I just wanted to point out that the reason why I left it like this is because I wanted to show how the point spread has shifted for these different matchups throughout the week. So as you can see, as we've moved closer to this game, Jacksonville State has gotten a point. So Tondo,
this game also opened, if I can chime in, this game opened at 1.5.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money coming in on Jacksonville State. It's crazy.
Which
with that, Tondo, how do you think this one's going to go?
Yeah, like it seems like a trap game for me. I mean, hand up, I have not watched a lot of Conference USA football in the grand scheme of things, but just going through stuff, I mean, Western Kentucky, better team against the spread. They're put up more points offensively. They let up less points defensively. They have a much significant lower turnover rate. They force more turnovers. And Caden Veldkamp's just a better quarterback than Louisiana Tech's quarterback in Evan Bullock. It's like the numbers show he has more rushing versatility. He has a little bit more offensive firepower across his board. Is Louisiana Tech a sick home environment? Is it? I mean, why is this a near touchdown difference at this point? So it's like I'm taking them to cover, and I have Western Kentucky outright to win.
Cole, Jake, you guys feel the same way? Anything to add for the Hilltoppers here?
I think Western Kentucky, they started out pretty hot. I mean, their first game of the year was against Bama. They got smoked. That's not a surprise, right? But they had a pretty good year. I mean, and I think the thing that sticks out for me for them is their defense. I mean, in a lot of games, they haven't let up that many points. And, Jacksonville State is a team offensively that has put up a lot of points. But as you saw in last week's matchup, Western Kentucky was able to hold Jacksonville State to only 17. So if they're able to do that, I think they can win again. It's really going to come down to how their defense plays. But, I think regardless, 5 points, too much, especially in a conference championship game. I think it's going to be a close one that comes down the wire. And I don't know. I just like Western Kentucky.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. Jacksonville State's QB1 might not play. So, like, that's I still don't know why the spread has grown 3 points. Like, this is outrageous to me. Tyler Huff, he went down in that game they played last week, ankle. Rich Rodriguez says he's game time this week. That to me does not sound like a guy they are like too confident in playing. Like, I feel like you hear coaches say, he's trending in the right direction. Like, we're hopeful. We'll see how he feels, blah, blah, blah. Rich Rodriguez just goes, yeah, he tweaked it. He's limited all week. It's going to be a game time thing. Like, that's just not optimistic for me. Looking at their backup quarterback, Logan Smothers. What has he done this year? Okay, he's started in one game. He's 11 for 19, 58%. Rush first quarterback, 21 attempts for 165 yards. That's not a guy I'm betting on. And an injured Tyler Huff is not a guy I'm betting on either. He's had a pretty decent year. All signs point me to Western Kentucky here, mostly because they won against this team last week, but secondarily because of all these other factors.
Yeah, absolutely. I like Jacksonville State here. I like their run game. They're going to keep it close. Western Kentucky only won on special teams last game. They have a much better pass game, but I don't know. I like Jacksonville State to win it outright at home. Up next, we've got the American Athletic Conference, obviously a game that we've talked about a lot. Army versus Tulane. Tulane, I felt like they would have stuck around in the college football playoff rankings if they didn't drop that game to Memphis last week. So right now, it feels like Army's game to lose because they just want to grasp onto that last very thin hope of making it into the college football playoff. Looks like a lot of us are loving Tulane, but a lot of us are taking Army against the spread. Tulane's gotten another point in their favor as the week's gone by. Tondo, how does Army cover here, and how does Tulane get the win?
Tulane's one of those teams we kind of overlooked all year that has now made this second half resurgence. I mean, Tulane was our team of destiny last year. This was Basil wearing the hat, pointing, this is the green wave. Yes, I do think that Tulane should win this game, but I'm not trying to give up on the Army the year that they've had. So I think they do cover. I think it all comes down to Army's run defense is, staying on top. But the problem is, I pulled this stat, is Tulane is 9-0 when running for 150 yards or more, and they're 0-3 when they're not. So it comes down to Army's defense stopping the run, because if they can get yards on the field, they'll win this easily.
Absolutely. Cole, any thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, look, Army's had a great year. Hats off to them. It's really, they've been fun to watch. But what it comes down to me, I mean, look, their quarterback, Bryson Daly, he's on the ground, been unbelievable. They've been able to run the ball well. I think the key in this game, if they want to win it, is going to be time of possession. They have to keep the ball out of Tulane's hands and kind of control the clock, because I don't think they're going to be able to put up that many points. And, if Tulane gets going, Darian Menser, their freshman quarterback, really excited for this kid and to see how he progresses in the next couple of years, because he's been pretty impressive this year. I mean, he's thrown for 20 touchdowns, 5 picks. Really has had a good year. And I don't know. I mean, I just think that Tulane, they have the ability to put up more points. You look at them, they played Navy earlier in the year and they beat them 35-0. So is that something similar that we're going to see with Army? I'm not sure. But I just think they lost to Memphis last week in a big game that I think hurt their playoff chances, right? Because had they won that game and then, they win this conference championship, I think they're still in the conversation for the college football playoff potentially. But, I just think that they bounce back from that loss on Thanksgiving, and I think they take care of Army. But I do like Army to keep it close.
Absolutely. All right, let's get into the Mountain West, the last game on Friday. This is a rematch, another rematch, not 2 weeks in a row, but, it feels very fresh. Boise State took this first meeting at UNLV 29-24. They got 3.5 points on the road at home when Tondo placed his bets, and it's shifted another half point in the Broncos' way. It really feels like Boise State, Ashton Jeanty, obviously a Heisman frontrunner, could do some real damage against UNLV. But again, we have to give the Rebels props here, or the running Rebels props here. They have made their way to the Mountain West Conference Championship game after making a quarterback change midway through the season. Obviously, we talked about it earlier this year on the show, but it was a huge headline. Quarterback Matthew Sluka, who transferred to UNLV from Holy Cross, left the team after some disputes about guaranteed money with his NIL. Again, new era of college athletics. And Hajj-Malik Williams has really taken the reins here and kept UNLV in the race. But can he do it further and get them over the hump and get them in the college football playoff? Jake, what are your thoughts here?
I don't know. This goes back to I hate to give the convenient answer that this is the story of one kid. But it's really hard for me to look at this objectively and say Boise State won't carve them up on the run. I mean, I'm going to bet on a guy that scored 28 rushing touchdowns and rushed for 2,300 yards any day of the week, right? I think, literally, absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind that he should be. We'll see what the people at the top have to say about that. But UNLV's offense is good. It's hard to stop, but I mean they match up pretty well defensively with each other. So that being said, I mean, like I take Ashton Jeanty and Boise State all the way here. I think Hajj-Malik Williams, who I come on the show and stand every single week, has done an excellent job. I think this has the marks of a shootout all over it, but I think Boise State gets it done handily.
Absolutely. We love stand culture in football. We need more stands around.
Especially
around
like
sport.
Mountain West quarterbacks. Why not, man?
Absolutely.
Former Big South CAA standout quarterbacks. I love it.
Absolutely. Cole, you've also got Boise State -4 here. How do you think this one's going to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a shootout, like Jake said. Two great teams. I mean, UNLV, for what they experienced in the middle of a year to lose your quarterback and then to go on this kind of run, it's actually very impressive, and it just shows what type of team they are, to go through that adversity and, not let it affect them. Look, I mean, their two losses this year are against two good teams. They lost to Boise State by 5 points in their first matchup, and then they lost to Syracuse in overtime and lost by 3 points there in a 44-41 game. So a team that can definitely put up a lot of points for sure. And I think it's going to be tight, but I do think, I just think Boise knows that they have to win this game to get in the playoff, and they've been there all year. Everyone's been talking about them being kind of that 12th team in, and now they have the potential to get a bye if they win this game in the college football playoff. So plus, the running back, Gentry, he's been unbelievable all year. They are playing Friday night, and the Heisman Trophy is awarded the next night on Saturday. So maybe he can get his stock up, little last push, and we'll see what happens.
Well, it's going to be awarded the following Saturday. The 14th.
Oh, okay. All right.
But still, a big push for his Heisman campaign.
Yeah.
Tondo, if Boise State, gets the job done, and unless Arizona State, I should say, has a crazy performance in the Big 12 and surpasses Boise State as the fourth best conference champ, the Broncos, unfortunately, will not get to host a home game. Obviously you want the bye, you want the rest. But I think a lot of teams are going to have a lot of fun, and a lot of fan bases are going to have a lot of fun creating that atmosphere in their first ever college football playoff campus games. We're not going to see that for Boise, but we're going to get to see this beautiful blue field in the Mountain West Championship game. We're going to get to see the Boise fan base going nuts. What do you expect, out of this fan base? How riled up do you think they are right now on the verge of the college football playoff?
Explosive as their running back, right? I think, Boise State is a fan base that you have not heard a lot from since this year, and I'm glad they're back. I missed the early 2000s scene there, or the, late, what's the word? Like 2007 to 2011 time frame was a prime
late
time
2000s.
for Boise.
Kellen Moore, baby.
Kellen Moore, bring back some glory, bring back the blue turf. And again, like Cole and Jake said, I don't want to base it off of one player, but UNLV has allowed a lot of just explosive plays. And when you have one of the most explosive players, like Genchi running, I'm surprised the spread's only 3 or 4 now.
Yeah, no, great point. And if you want to get a good taste of aside from Boise State's home games, which have been fantastic, how electric this fan base has been. Look at how well they traveled to Oregon in the early part of the season. I mean, that was a fairly good showing for Boise State in that game in Eugene. Moving on to Saturday, we're starting off with the MAC championship game. There was a point in the season after NIU took down Notre Dame where we were talking about the Huskies as being a that group of 5 playoff spot. Obviously, they've fallen completely out of there, and we've got Ohio versus Miami of Ohio in this year's MAC championship game. We're pretty split on this one. This is our first one where not all 3 out of 4 of us are going with the. Well, I guess. Oh, never mind. Three. I thought Tondo had Miami spread there, but Cole, you're the only one who's got Miami taking this one with the spread. How do you feel like Miami's going to do here?
Yeah, I just like Miami. They're on a 7-game winning streak right now. They did play Ohio earlier in the year in October, beat them by 10 points. This spread is very close. You can see mine. I got it at 1.5. This is toss-up, right? Anything could happen. Both 2 good teams in the MAC, 2 teams that know each other, interstate rivals. I think it's going to come down to the wire, but I don't know. Something's telling me the Red Hawks are going to take this game. So,
absolutely.
I don't know. I've respected the run game this year. That's all. Nobody ever had a guy that like Ohio's quarterback. What's the kid's name? Navarro. He's ran in 13 touchdowns, and he's only about 90 yards off pace from their RB1. So yeah, that's just a guy that I don't know. I respect that a lot about this team, and that's what I think. That's why I think they might sneak one past Miami here.
Yeah, Ohio last year was just an offensive juggernaut. I felt like every game they were putting up like 35 to 40 points. We didn't see that as much this year, but for them to compound 2023 being just a great offensive team, and then 2024 MAC champs could be the sign of some really good things to come for the Bobcats. Also,
Blaine Gabbert, baby. Blaine Gabbert's brother from Miami. He's going to take them to glory.
Hell yeah. Also kicking off at 12 is our first Power 4 game of the weekend. Oh, Tondo, you had something?
I agree with those points as well.
Great.
No, I mean, I think I do think it's a coin flip. I kind of took Ohio as more of like I like the rivalry between them. I think they're pretty even split, but when you look at the rest of the card, I definitely lean more towards some favorites in my picks. So got to have an underdog story here or there.
Absolutely. Moving into the Big 12, our first Power 4 game of the weekend. A lot of us like the Cyclones, but Cole, once again, you like the Sun Devils to continue their huge swing into the top of the Big 12. After being projected to be one of the worst teams in the conference in the preseason, you've got the Sun Devils winning and covering -2. What do you like out of them?
I really just like how Arizona State's played this year. They've put up a ton of points. Their offense has looked really good. I think that they just have found their groove. And, Iowa State kind of We thought they were going to be a team. They've been part of the discussion all year. I think in a lot of people's eyes, they've been kind of disappointing. Like, I think a lot of people expected Iowa State to, be one of the top teams in the Big 12, if not the number one, heading into the year. And for a while there, it was BYU. Colorado was in the mix. But I think coming in the year, everyone had Iowa State and Kansas State. Those were the two teams that everyone thought was going to be in the Big 12. So Arizona State has shocked a lot of people. I think they continue to shock the world, and I love their coach. He's fiery, and I just think he knows how to lead a football team. So I think they're going to get a victory here.
Absolutely. And Tondo, Iowa State, they've got some shaky losses on their resume, I have to say. I mean, their 2 losses to Texas Tech, 23-22, and then Kansas, who was kind of a giant killer in this year's Big 12. But how do you feel like the Cyclones are going to get it done here?
That's a good question. I mean, I like the Cyclones play just because I think Arizona State's one of those teams that just has now emerged later on into the season. I do believe that their defense does match up well against this, but I'm reading a few articles before we hopped on, and everyone keeps hopping on Iowa State's special teams unit as if that's going to be a potential, reason for cover. So if I'm going to take the cover, the 3 points, might as well win the whole damn thing. So give me Iowa State to win it.
I mean, Iowa State's in a lot of one-score games. They let's see, they 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 since I think it's 4 of their last 6 have been one-score games. So yeah, special teams could be key there.
Absolutely. Moving on, we've got the SEC Championship at 4:00. Texas versus Georgia, another rematch. Georgia took this first one 30-15. It was a great defensive effort from the Bulldogs. I felt like when we were recapping this game, the one thing that I noticed was, I mean, they just shut down both Ewers and Manning. Like they really had their number in both games. Against both quarterbacks. There was really nothing about Texas's scheme with one guy or the other that was the problem there. It was just Georgia was locked in. But we've got the Longhorns winning and covering. Jake, how does Texas flip the script here and win the SEC championship in their first year in the conference?
Man, I mean, like everyone talks about and has rightfully so talked about Georgia's defense these past few years, and with good reason, right? It's been like the crown jewel of defenses. But I look at the stats and just everything. Like Texas, their defense is just so much better on paper than Georgia's is this year. And I think Georgia's last few games might have killed them, right? Like 8 OT game against Georgia Tech was not helpful for the stats here, for sure. Texas is 3rd in the nation in total yards defensively per game at 266. They're 1st in the nation in defending passing, which Georgia, amazingly, like I've always thought of them as this rushing team, but they're 10th in the nation offensively in passing yards. So like you'd put a top 10 passing offense against the best secondary in the league, basically, and this is a recipe for Texas's success, right? Like how do you knock off like one of Georgia's biggest strengths this year, which is their quarterback? You just throw the nation's best defense at them. So that's, I think, what Texas has to do, right? Simply put, we did not see that in game 1. If Texas plays to their identity in this game, they will come out and be the SEC champions. I think no questions asked there.
Yeah. Last week, obviously, Georgia was in a 8 overtime thriller against in-state rival Georgia Tech. As exciting as that game was, I think what it really showed was maybe some problems in the Georgia, on both ends, really. They had to come back and win that game in 8 overtimes. There were a lot of periods where, the game kept extending because teams were just making mistakes, right? Just bad throws. I mean, good stops, but it's how much of those were good stops and how much of those were just bad throws. So Tondo, was anything from that game anything stand out to you that kind of affected you picking Texas here?
Chalk that one up to earlier in the season. I think if we just looking at Texas in December of 2024, this is the only team that can beat Oregon. And I think this is, their real statement has to be today, this upcoming weekend. No hiccups, no prior mashups, because again, the same sentiment can be said that the Georgia team today is not the one that they played, a few months prior. So I've just been riding with Texas. I believe that they are back, and I'm ready for, Sarkisian and Ewers and the whole squad to just knock Georgia off the pedestal.
And Cole, you mentioned earlier in the pod, you're not too high on Carson Beck, Georgia's quarterback. Where has he struggled this season that has you having the Longhorns coming out on top in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think multiple factors this game why I'm taking Texas, but Carson Beck's definitely one of them. I think it's been evident throughout the year. He has not had the season that they expected of him or that he's expected of himself. I think he has been struggling on reads and just hasn't been able really to get it done. I think you just look at the quarterbacks, Carson Beck and, Ewers or Manning. I think that Texas has a big advantage over Georgia in that department. I think, like you guys said, the first game that they played, Georgia won because their defense played unbelievable. But like Tondo said, this is not the same Georgia team that we've seen in years past, right? They're not as elite. There's definitely some holes and weaknesses, and they've been able to overcome those and get some wins in some close games, especially last week. They got lucky, but I just think Texas has found its stride. You have Coach Sark, who's an offensive-minded guy. He's going to, dissect that film from the first game and find out what wasn't working and why and go after Georgia where he can. So I think that they exploit the defense in this game. And, just looking at the game last week against Georgia Tech, the one thing that really stood out for me in that game was Georgia's defense. They could not tackle at all. They struggled so much. Like Haynes King, the quarterback for Georgia Tech, he was running all over them, getting out of guys, just arm tackling. They weren't able to bring them down, right? And that's why they got into that deficit, and they had to come back in the fourth quarter. And a lot of things went their way to even get back in that game. And, I said it earlier on the show tonight, like if Georgia Tech had won that game, Georgia wouldn't even be in the college football playoff. They wouldn't be playing in this SEC championship game. So I think they've snuck it out to this point, but that only works for so long against teams that are, okay. When you're playing a team like Texas that has its shit together and is one of the top teams in the country, and you already beat them, so they have a chip on their shoulder, they're going to come out and try to get you back. So I'm taking the Longhorns. I think they're going to win pretty convincingly in this game.
Absolutely. And that's a standalone game at 4:00 on Saturday, which would roll us right into the Sun Belt at 7:30. We've got Louisiana taking on Marshall. Jake, if I recall correctly, you were kind of high on the Raging Cajuns as, a solid group of 5 team throughout the season, and you're sticking with them to win this game outright over the Herd. What have you liked out of them so far, and where do you think they can succeed on Saturday?
Yeah, they're a big passing team. I think I ranked them one week, and I'm pretty sure they lost to South Alabama the week I ranked them. So that was fun. They did not show up in my rankings after that. If I didn't, they were a bubble team. Let's see. Let's look at their schedule. I mean, what I've liked about them all year is they've scored a lot of points, right? Like you've had 2 50-point endeavors in November alone. They pass the football at ease. The over-under is super high in this game. So, this again, I think has the makings of a shootout. So we'll see what happens here. But I just like the way they've moved the football. Again, the Sun Belt's not a fantastic, no win is really going to make me go, whoa, that's a great win other than scoring a bunch of points. That's the sole reason I've liked the Raging Cajuns this year.
Absolutely. Tondo, Cole, any thoughts on this one?
For me, go ahead, Tondo. I'll go.
No, after you.
For me, I just look at it like two good teams in the Sun Belt. Marshall, they've kind of been hot. They're on a 6-game winning streak. I think the number for them right now, the special number going in this game is 27. If they've scored over 27 points this year, they haven't lost a game. Their 2 losses, they scored less than that. So you can get 3 or 4 touchdowns on the board and prevent Louisiana from, putting up 50, like Jake had just mentioned. Their offense have been rolling. So if their defense can, make some stops, keep the game close, then I like Marshall in this game.
Absolutely. Heading over at 8 o'clock, we've got 2 games tipping off, or kicking off rather. I'm in basketball mode sometimes, but 2 games kicking off at 8 o'clock. First one, we're going to talk about the ACC championship, and that is SMU versus Clemson. Clemson obviously found their way in. Solid wins, both great wins in ACC play, but as we've mentioned, SMU has not dropped a game in conference. 2.5 point spread. They had actually moved to 2 today, at some point today, but this is a must-win for the Ponies. They are not 100% safe in this year's college football playoffs. Cole, I want to start with you. Where do the Mustangs succeed here?
Yeah, I mean, look, last year they had a great year, right? We didn't have the 12-team playoff, but really impressive year last year. Didn't know what they were going to do this year going in the ACC, playing against some big-time schools, and they've held their own. Pony Express is rolling, and I think you said it perfectly. They have to win this game. This is a playoff game. This is a must-win game. If they lose, then there's probably a good possibility that they don't get in, which would be a shame, but that's just the way it is. I like how they performed all year. Their only loss was against a BYU team that, they kind of fell apart at the end of the year, but good football team. I think they're going to try to make a statement, and I don't know. I just think that this is their year. First year in the ACC. I don't think Clemson is back yet. I think they're on the right trajectory. The last couple of years they've struggled a lot, and they kind of snuck in this year to potentially set themselves up for a playoff position. But I don't know. I just think SMU is the better team overall on both sides of the ball, and I think it's a must-win game. So go Ponies, baby. Pony up.
Absolutely. What's crazy is, SMU, talking to SMU, the opportunity for them to win the conference in their first year in the ACC. I mean, that's true for 5 conferences this year.
Wow.
Army, Oregon, Texas, Arizona State, and SMU are 5 teams out of the 9. So a majority of the conference championship games have a first-year team, and a lot of them have a first-year team favored. Obviously, Army is the underdog in this one, but in the American, but a really strong showing from a lot of the conference newcomers. Jake, Clemson, they've hung around. They got in over Miami. How do they – you've got SMU winning, but is there anything Clemson can do to kind of justify their inclusion in this game over Miami? You got
to shake off. Like you just have to shake the cobwebs off, man. I mean, like I look at I did not watch against South Carolina last week, but everything about that loss has to be gut-wrenching, and that's to me like why SMU is such an appealing pick here. Like I didn't even think twice about this. You go up into the fourth quarter. Clemson's on the precipice of the ACC, potentially going in, potentially having this as a home game for Clemson to defend their home turf, and they let up 10 points in the fourth quarter and they get blanked, right? Like that just – it's hard for me to think there's a world where the wind's just not totally out of their sail right now. So this is all mental for me, right? It's like, yeah, if they can reverse course and shake that crap off, then great. But I just see every force in the world against Clemson right now.
I will say too, like I think that SMU, from their point of view, they have to be ecstatic that they got Clemson instead of Miami, because I think if Miami played SMU, I think Miami would have beat them.
It's a totally different ballgame.
Very easily. Cam Ward, Restrepo, their offense, they're explosive. I think that would have been a big problem for SMU. So they're sitting here now saying we were lucky enough to get Clemson. They're a 3-loss team. Let's take care of them and show that we're the top dogs in the ACC. So,
yeah, and there's probably a lot of Miami fans sitting at home saying that, and the best way for them to have that come true is don't lose to Syracuse by 4 points, right? So again, that's what at the end of the day, we're talking all this. Oh, this guy would beat this guy. This guy would beat this guy. But it's at the end of the day, you got to win games ahead of you to earn that opportunity. Let's get into our final championship game of the night. Also kicking off at 8 p.m. We've got the Big Ten championship between Oregon and Penn State. We're all in agreement here. Oregon, the number 1 team in the country, is probably going to beat the Nittany Lions here. I feel like after Penn State lost to Ohio State, I really feel like it, credibility-wise, I mean, look, they're a good team. They're a top 4 team in the country now, rankings-wise, and I think they deserve to be there. But I think that loss to Ohio State really took a lot of wind out of their sails. I feel like people don't really trust them to be a great team in this year's playoffs. But, is there anything here that Penn State could show heading into the playoffs that makes you kind of change your perspective on this team?
Well, I think it also looks worse, too, now that Ohio State got their teeth kicked in by Michigan. That it's Penn State really should have taken care of business. Again, I believe all of us had Ohio State for the most part winning that game, but at least to cover the spread. I think the only thing, Penn State can provide in this matchup is their advantage in defending the Ducks rushing attack. I think that is going to be something that can stand out for them. But again, I'm still surprised that this spread is so minimal, because of how great Oregon has looked throughout the entire year.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's just, look, Penn State, I think that they've had a great program over the last 10 years. They've been great, but they've never gotten over the hump, right? And it's part of the same problem that Ohio State's facing. We hear the names all the time, especially as of late, James Franklin and Ryan Day. 2 coaches that just can't get over the top dog in the Big Ten. Penn State has a great opportunity here, because if they somehow do beat Oregon, they could potentially be the number 1 or 2 seed in the college football playoff, and they would get the bye, right? So it's a huge game for them. There's a lot to play for, but just based on experience, and it's like seeing the same thing every year, deja vu with Penn State. They always have a good record until the end of the year when it comes down to the games that matter most, and they just can't get the victory over those top tier teams. And look, I think Oregon's offense, like it's always been, is just way too explosive. So I agree with Tondo. If the Penn State Nittany Lions are going to stay in the game or keep it close, it's going to be on their defense. But I don't know. I just don't think that they're going to be able to contain Dylan Gabriel and Oregon's offense.
I truly do believe Oregon's the best team in the league. I do believe that, and I think they were hardened at the beginning of the year. That's why. I don't know that we had a lot of panic on Oregon, but that's just what they were, right? They were just a team that everybody's like, why the hell are they in the top 5? They almost lost to Idaho. They almost lost to this team in the Mountain West called Boise State, right? All this stuff. And Dan Lanning was like, no, we've got to just trust the process. Yeah, we've got to clean some stuff up and play better. Same with Dylan Gabriel. People were giving him crap at the beginning of the year. They're like, man, he was supposed to be good. What happens, right? And he's just tuned it all out, and they've been on a tear ever since then. So I think because they were hardened, they're set up really well for success here. It's not even a question for me.
All right.
Yeah, and I think Lanning, he's the best coach right now in college football. Guy that he's a football guy, gets his guys fired up. I don't know if you guys saw the video of when they played Washington. He took out the helmet with the sledgehammer in the middle of the locker room. I mean, that's a guy you want to play for. You run through a brick wall for. And look, I mean, he's a disciple of Kirby Smart, and George is in this playoff, and there might be a matchup between those two teams where he's going to want to prove, that he can make a name for himself and that he's a big time coach in his own right. And he definitely has a chip on his shoulder, and they just kind of have this swagger, Oregon, that on offense that they can fly around, but also on defense that they're going to smash people's mouths in. So I don't know. I just think I like Oregon. I think they have all the tools, like Jake said. I think just all around, they're the number one team in all of college football. They're right where they belong, and I just think they're going to be too much for Penn State. So,
yeah, absolutely. That brings us to a close for our conference championship picks. It's going to be a great weekend. Next week, we'll be talking a little awards talk, maybe getting a little extra early preview at some bowl games. There have already been some bowl games like fully announced. I think the Bahamas Bowl and the Hawaii Bowl have been fully announced. But we'll get into that next week. There's some really cool stuff that we've got in the works that, I don't want to spoil it yet, but it's going to be a fun show. The last thing I want to talk about, though, tonight is looking a little forward into 2025. And this is news coming out of the ACC today with North Carolina. I'm sure a lot of you know the Tar Heels, who finished 6-6 this year. They'll probably go bowling, but it looks like Mac Brown will not be with the team following the conclusion of the season. And according to ESPN's Chris Lowe, UNC is having conversations about bringing in 6-time Super Bowl champion Bill Belichick to coach the Tar Heels. Jake, you're shaking your head. You're a Pats fan. Oh, camera's off. Wow. I did not realize that this would rile you up like this. But, Bill Belichick, he's without a job right now. I don't think a lot of people expected him to even consider going to the college game. I thought people were really going to think that he was going to be one of the first options for any open NFL jobs come 2025. But if he's entertaining this, I mean, how does that throw a wrench in the chain of, NFL openings? But, I mean, how could this change, just the landscape of college football for a legendary coach like this to come to the FBS level?
On the NFL side, I think if this is actually true, that means there's no landscape for him to return in the NFL, which pretty much means, hey, Bill, you're either a coach or a GM. You're not both. And I don't think there's many teams that are willing to put both eggs in the same basket type of thing. I see it as two potential avenues. Either one, this is all smoke to try to make a team to jump on him, being like, I'm just going to go to college. Or the second, if this is actually legit and he goes to UNC, it's a pipeline for his son to then become a head coach because he's doing well over in Washington. Well, not well, but he's starting to make his footing over in Washington.
Very interesting.
I don't know. I do agree. I think this could be smoke.
Because I heard he interviewed.
Yeah, he did. It was confirmed.
It's like it's a confirmed interview, not just like a mutual interest or something.
Yeah, they interviewed the guy that runs Inside Carolina. I think is that the source you have, Basil?
I had Chris Lowe from ESPN,
okay.
And that was at 6:19. He was just talking about there were conversations.
There's some dude that runs Inside Carolina, which is one of the Tar Heel papers down there. That he verified this through several sources, I guess. So like it happened. I want him in the NFL. If he's going to coach, he's going to be at the NFL ranks, right? Like, and I understand he's kind of poking his feet around. Maybe he thinks this is an attractive, cushy job that he's going to have a lot of booster support. He's going to be able to coach lacrosse in the spring, that kind of stuff. Like that's, I wouldn't be surprised if that's his thought process here, but like this guy needs to be in the NFL. And you make a good point on the personnel control piece, Tondo. Like, 98.5 up here has been talking about that all week. where would this team have been, the New England Patriots, if they just said, all right, Bill, we're going to keep you, but you have to give up control. Like, it's growing harder by the day for me to think they shouldn't have just done that. Or that they should have just done that, I should say, right? Like, there's talk that this Patriots team could have been like at least a 6 or 7 win team if that happened. But instead, you have to sever the relationship off. You have to start over with a guy that has no head coaching experience. Like, I don't know. You say, okay, Bill, we're going to kick you out of this GM role. We're going to hire a general manager. We're going to have Gerard Mayo and your son call the defensive plays. We're going to have McDaniels or Bill O'Brien call the offensive plays. We just got you this great new freaking quarterback. How would things have changed? Right? Like, that's a legacy right there. To me, that's a guy that should be coaching in the NFL. No ifs, ands, or buts.
He bit himself in the foot not being able to – he drafted and signed shit players to then he had to coach, and it's like he lost his fastball.
I think he dug his grave, but I also think, like, if I'm Kraft, I call his bluff. If you tell him, hey, Bill, we're going to take away your personnel control, I truly do think he would have stayed.
I don't get why he would even want to go back to coaching, NFL or college.
That's true. Well, because he's stubborn and he wants to prove something. That's a pretty easy one.
He's killing it on the media side. His content game is really enjoyable.
That and, his organic content of Ring cameras of coming out some chick's house in Winthrop. That's pretty cool.
Well, that's an old one. Now he's got his little college honey.
I know. Maybe it was her house. I don't know. I just think that if this guy is going to step back into the ring, it makes directional sense to me. This is a guy that should be – I think he should be the Cowboys coach next year. I really do. I think when Mike McCarthy gets fired, like, you're stepping into a team that is not bad. Like, yeah, they have not had a good year, but the talent's there. You have one of the most financially backed owners in the history of sports. I mean, like, that's, to me, where he belongs, but what the hell do I know?
Yeah, very interesting stuff. And to confirm that report that you were talking about, Jake, Grant Hughes of Inside Carolina confirmed today that he did interview. So
he also, if I'm not mistaken, down there said that he's not like a top 5 candidate. Like he's not expected to get that job. But I
just think the fact that the door is open to the possibility of that is remarkable. You know what I mean?
Have we seen this?
Us talking about it.
Have we seen it at this level? I mean, maybe besides like, I don't know. I don't really think we've seen anything like this. Like, yeah, Bill O'Brien did this recently, like, but he wasn't a head coach and he's Bill O'Brien. Like, what's the most high profile coach that leaves an NFL job, takes a year off, and goes to the college ranks after never coaching there before?
Harbaugh's really the only one.
Harbaugh.
But I guess like Harbaugh's background was in college, right?
Yeah, because he was at Stanford before.
Yeah.
Because like Belichick was not really a college football coach ever.
Yeah, I think part of it is, one, he just loves football, right? And I think if he has the opportunity to coach a football team, he wants to do it. 2, his father was also a college football coach. That might have something to do with it, right? He was coach at Navy. Bill loves the history of the game. And the one thing that does surprise me about him even taking the interview, though, is the whole landscape of college football and where it is now, the NIL and the recruiting and the transfers. Like, that's why Nick Saban left, right? Like, that's why he's no longer coaching, because he didn't want to have to put up with that. He's kind of an old school guy and was like, this isn't for me anymore. I don't want to do it. So it kind of surprised me that Bill would want to step in and kind of get involved in that. But at the same time, we've also said that college sports are kind of becoming like professional, like minor leagues, with all these business deals and, players getting paid and all this money going back and forth. So it is kind of like dealing with professional athletes at this point. So I don't know.
Yeah. And Bill also likes to be a GM, you know? Well, now also college teams are hiring GMs outside of head coaches too.
Yeah. Look at Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck got hired.
Look on the basketball side, look at Woj.
I think it's a smart play. I think it's the game has evolved too much where it's also becoming like, I want a head coach that is just focusing on what's happening on the field. And like, yes, you have to build the camaraderie in the locker room and you have to do all of this, management stuff in the play. But I'm sorry, Bill Belichick is not worrying about NIL deals. If it was him, he's like, you're getting $5 to play and you're playing every single snap of the game.
This is the same guy that traded top tier linebackers for 3rd round draft picks.
Yeah.
This guy does not give a fuck.
I know, but it's a little different when you're dealing with college kids compared to professional athletes, just because of the maturity level. And I mean, look at all these kids that they don't get their way and they're transferring and, whatever it is, right? They can get a bit better deal somewhere else. Like, I don't know. It's hard. I think it's hard to keep, like, Bill had the luxury for a lot of years also of a lot of guys that took team friendly deals because they were winning, right? I don't think you get that on the college side because one, you're not making a career out of it. You're only there for 3 or 4 years. And two, you're trying to make a name for yourself so that you can get to the next level to make big money. So they don't care.
It's also like North Carolina, it's not like a bad program, but it's, there's prestige to it. Yeah.
I was going to say, when's the last time North Carolina did anything?
I mean, look, I think he would do well if he does get it. Like, he's a great football coach, but I think there's just so much that goes into it, and it's so out of what he's used to that it would definitely be a big adjustment period.
I agree with you.
So he'd have to find the right people to, bring in around him that are familiar with the college landscape and know what they're doing, to get him adjusted. But he's the best of all time. I think he would do just fine. So.
Very, very interesting stuff in the college football world. And we still got a whole 2 months or a month and a half left of games to play. So we'll be here until the end at the Football House, giving you the best picks we can. For more great college football content, keep checking us out at house-enterprise.com/the blog. Ohm Brown, one of our, frequent football contributors, gave his own takes on the 5 most important conference championship games and his final predicted bracket. So make sure you check that out on the blog. Compare it with our picks. Compare it with your own picks. Let us know how you think this weekend's going to go. Keep following us on social media, on X, on Instagram, on Threads, if you're one of the 5 people that uses that. And until then, we'll see you guys next time.